Grant liked to joke that his fiancée's Pulitzer Prize made her exhausting, a jagged compliment he used to cut her down to size. I played along because I was 33 and terrified of my own past, but when she asked to interview me for Forbes, I realized she wasn't writing a puff piece. She was investigating a crime my brother helped bury, and she intended to use my ruined reputation as the shovel. The cursor blinked at the end of the spreadsheet row, a rhythmic, taunting pulse that seemed to sync with the headache throbbing behind my left eye. $32,000. That was the gap between what I had in the bank and what I needed to make payroll on Friday. It was Tuesday. I had 3 days to chase down 2 invoices that were currently sitting in the accounts payable inboxes of mid-sized logistics firms in Ohio. Or I would have to dip into my personal savings again. My personal savings were not robust. They were a scorched earth remnant of my previous life, the life before the crash. I closed my laptop, the screen going black and reflecting my own face back at me. I looked tired. At 33, I wore the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to outrun a Google search result. My startup, Verity Flow, was small, unglamorous, and painstakingly legitimate. We built software for tracking supply chain compliance. It was boring. I loved it because it was boring. Boring meant safe. Boring meant nobody was writing hit pieces about me on tech blogs or dissecting my facial expressions from a 3-year-old press conference. The vibration of my phone against the mahogany desk made me jump. I looked down and saw the name Grant flashing on the screen. I let it buzz 3 times before answering. I needed that brief pause to construct the armor. "Hey, Grant," I said, forcing a lightness into my voice that did not match the knot in my stomach. "Ellie," he said. No greeting, just the name. His voice had that rich, baritone projection he used when he was walking through corridors he felt he owned. "I need you to be available on Thursday night. Dinner at Mom and Dad's." I checked my calendar, though I already knew it was empty. I'm pretty swamped with the quarter close. "Grant, I don't know if I can make the drive out to Connecticut on a weeknight. Cancel whatever you have," he said. The command wrapped in a chuckle to make it sound like brotherly advice. "This isn't a barbecue. I'm bringing Naomi." I paused. Naomi was the fiancée. I had never met her. They had been engaged for 2 months. A whirlwind romance that Grant had described to me in vague, triumphant texts. "The journalist?" I asked. "The Pulitzer Prize winner," he corrected. And I could hear the puff of his chest through the receiver. "Look, she is a big deal. Serious intellectual property. I need you to come and, handle the family side of things. Keep Mom from asking about grandchildren in the first 10 minutes. And frankly, I need you to keep it classy." I bristled, the old familiar heat rising in my neck. Keep it classy, as if I were a feral animal he had to apologize for. "I think I can manage basic table manners." "Grant," he laughed, a sharp, barking sound. I know. I just mean, don't bring up the whole Brightwell thing. Naomi is in that world. She knows everyone. I don't want her looking at you and seeing a cautionary tale. Just talk about your little logistics app. Keep it light. She's intense enough for the whole room." I gripped the phone tighter. "Is she?" Grant sighed, the sound of a man burdened by his own success. "You have no idea. She is exhausting. Ellie, too accomplished for her own good. You try to have a normal conversation about where to vacation, and she starts analyzing the geopolitical stability of the region. It is like dating a CNN ticker. But she looks good on paper, right?" The way he said it made my skin crawl. She looks good on paper, as if she were an asset he was acquiring to round out a portfolio. "I will be there." "Grant," I said, "Thursday at 7. Make it 6:30, drinks first, and wear something structural. She likes structure." He hung up before I could say goodbye. I sat in the silence of my small rented office, the hum of the air conditioning unit filling the room. I thought about the woman he had just described. A Pulitzer winner. Intense. Exhausting. Grant usually dated women who laughed at all his jokes and asked him to explain the stock market to them. This was a deviation. I opened my laptop again and typed Naomi Hale into the search bar. The results flooded the screen. Headshots of a woman with sharp cheekbones and eyes that looked like they were dissecting the camera lens. Headlines from the Washington Post, The Atlantic, ProPublica, The Cost of Concrete, How City Procurement Failed the Poor. Silenced in the Stacks, The Library Funding Scandal. She wasn't just a journalist, she was an investigative reporter, a hunter. I felt a cold prickle of unease. Grant worked for Redwood Pike Capital, a private equity firm that specialized in aggressive acquisitions. Grant was a man who thrived on optics. On the blurred line between confidence and deception, why was he marrying a woman whose career was built on exposing the truth? The drive to Connecticut on Thursday was a slow crawl through rush-hour traffic. I spent the time rehearsing my talking points. Business is steady. Growth is organic. No, we are not looking for venture capital right now. My parents' house was a sprawling colonial set back from the road behind a perimeter of manicured hedges. It was the house Grant and I had grown up in, a place where success was the only currency that held value. If you weren't winning, you were invisible. I parked my 10-year-old sedan behind Grant's gleaming black Porsche SUV. The contrast was a joke that wrote itself. When I walked through the front door, the smell of roasted garlic and expensive perfume hit me. My mother appeared from the hallway, her face flushed with the specific anxiety she always carried when Grant was home. "Ellie," she hissed, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a frisking. "You're late. They are already in the living room. Did you brush your hair?" "Hello to you too." "Mom," I said, pulling back, "I'm on time." "It is exactly 6:30. Grant wants everything perfect," she whispered, smoothing the lapel of my blazer. "She is very impressive, Ellie, very serious. Don't make any jokes about newspapers dying." "Okay. Your father already tried one and it didn't land." I walked past her into the living room. The space was dominated by the large stone fireplace and the overstuffed cream sofas that we were forbidden from sitting on as children. Grant was standing by the bar cart, mixing a drink. He looked the part of the Golden Sun tall, broad-shouldered. His hair swept back in a way that cost $80 every 2 weeks. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car. And on the cream sofa sat Naomi Hale. She was smaller than she looked in her photos, but she held the space with a gravity that made her seem 6 feet tall. She wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry except for a thin gold watch. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant knot. She wasn't holding a drink. She was just sitting, her hands folded in her lap, watching Grant with an expression I couldn't quite read. Ellie Grant boomed, spotting me. The prodigal sister returns. He crossed the room and kissed my cheek, smelling of bourbon and cedar. Then he turned, gesturing to the woman on the sofa like he was unveiling a statue. "Ellie, this is Naomi, the woman who is going to make an honest man out of me. Naomi, this is my little sister, Ellie. She runs a computer thing in the city." Naomi stood up. Her movement was fluid, controlled. She extended a hand, and her grip was firm, dry, and cool. "It is nice to meet you." "Ellie," she said. Her voice was lower than I expected, raspy and calm. "And it isn't a computer thing, is it? It's a supply chain compliance platform called VerityFlow. I read about your Series A round a few years ago, before you pivoted." I froze. My Series A round was from my previous company, Brightwell, the company that had imploded in a spectacular fireball of data mismanagement and scandal. The company I had been fired from. Yes, I stammered, pulling my hand back. That was a long time ago. VerityFlow is different, much smaller, bootstrapped. Naomi nodded, her dark eyes locking onto mine. "I know. I looked up your current client list. You are doing interesting work with textile sourcing in Southeast Asia, verifying labor standards through secondary data points. It is smart." I stared at her. "That wasn't general knowledge. You had to dig to find our specific validation methodology." Grant laughed, the sound jarringly loud. "See what I mean? Exhausting. She does a background check on everyone. Even family. I told her you were boring, but she insisted on reading the fine print." He walked over and draped an arm around Naomi's shoulders. squeezing her a little too tightly. "Babe, relax. Ellie is just trying to pay rent. She isn't saving the world." Naomi didn't flinch under his arm, but I saw a tiny muscle in her jaw tighten. She didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on me. "Transparency is a survival strategy," she said to me, ignoring Grant's comment entirely. "In your industry. At least, it is good to meet you." Ellie, I felt a sudden, strange disorientation. Grant had described her as intimidating, but this didn't feel like intimidation. It felt like recognition. She looked at me as if she knew exactly how heavy the air in the room was. Dinner was a performance art piece directed by Grant. We sat at the long mahogany table, the candlelight flickering on the crystal glasses. My father sat at the head, asking Grant questions about the market, which Grant answered with the confidence of an oracle. "So, the merger with Pike is still on track?" my father asked. Slicing into his steak, Grant smiled, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. "Better than on track. It is inevitable. We are going to reshape the mid-market landscape. It is going to be a bloodbath for our competitors. But that is the game." He looked at Naomi. "Naomi hates it when I talk about bloodbaths. Don't you?" "Honey, she thinks we should all hold hands and share our profits." Naomi took a sip of water. She hadn't touched her wine. "I think markets function better when they aren't rigged." "Grant, there is a difference between competition and predation." Grant rolled his eyes, looking at my mother. "See, this is what I get every morning over coffee." A lecture on ethics from the cheap seats. My mother let out a nervous titter. "Well, it is nice to have different perspectives. Keeps things lively." Grant leaned in, pointing his fork at Naomi. "Naomi won a Pulitzer." "Mom, did she tell you?" "For writing about cement contracts? Riveting stuff. I keep telling her we need to put the medal on the wall, but she keeps it in a drawer. She's afraid it makes her look arrogant. I think she keeps it in a drawer because she doesn't need to prove anything." I said, the words came out before I could stop them. Silence descended on the table. My father looked at me, surprised. Grant's smile tightened at the corners. Naomi turned her head slowly and looked at me. For a second, her guard dropped, and I saw something warm in her eyes. "Thank you, Ellie," she said softly. Grant cleared his throat. "Reclaiming the center stage. Well, she is modest. That is her brand. But seriously, Elle, you should ask her for advice. Naomi knows how to spin a story. Maybe she can help you with your reputation management." The air left my lungs. He had done it. He had brought up the one thing he promised not to touch. "My reputation is fine." "Grant," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Is it?" he asked, looking genuinely concerned, which was his favorite way to deliver a shank. "I just mean, if you Google the Brightwell lawsuit is still the first thing that comes up. Naomi could probably get that pushed down. She knows people at the search engines. I am not in PR. Grant," Naomi said. Her voice was like ice cracking. "And Ellie's history at Brightwell is more complex than a lawsuit." Grant laughed, pouring more wine into his own glass. "Everything is complex with you journalists. It is always a conspiracy. Sometimes. People just screw up. Ellie screwed up. She knows it. We still love her." He looked at me with a dazzling, predatory smile. "Right. Elle." I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "I need to use the restroom," I said. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of the dining room, down the hallway, and out the back door onto the patio. The night air was cold, biting. I inhaled deeply, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. Grant was a bully. He had always been a bully. But tonight, there was something else, a frantic energy. He was poking at Naomi, belittling her, trying to make her smaller, and he was using me as the weapon to do it. I stood in the shadows of the trellis, listening to the wind in the trees. I needed to leave. I would make an excuse, a headache, an early meeting. Then I heard the back door open. I froze, stepping deeper into the shadow of the climbing ivy. It was Grant. He walked to the edge of the stone patio, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, urgent, no charm now, just anger. I don't care what the timeline is, he hissed. You need to contain it. He paused, listening. No, she doesn't know, he said. She is asking questions, but she is just sniffing around. That is what she does. She is a dog with a bone, but she can't publish anything until after the merger. Do you understand? If the Armitage Trust data gets out before we close, the valuation tanks? Another pause. I am handling her. I am marrying her. For God's sake, I have it under control. Just keep the accounts clean on your end. He hung up and shoved the phone into his pocket. He stood there for a moment, running a hand through his hair, then turned and went back inside. I stood in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. She can't publish anything until after the merger. He wasn't talking about wedding announcements. He was talking about Naomi. He was talking about a story. I waited 2 minutes, then walked back inside. I told my mother I wasn't feeling well. I didn't look at Grant. I didn't look at Naomi. I got in my car and drove back to the city, the radio off, the silence screaming in my ears. The email arrived the next morning at 9:15 a.m. Subject Forbes, 30 under 40. Preliminary discussion from marinchom.cho@forbes.com. Dear Miss Reed, I hope this note finds you well. I am an editor with the Forbes Under 30 desk. We are currently finalizing our long list for the upcoming social impact vertical, and your name came highly recommended to us by Naomi Hale. Naomi suggested that your work with Verity Flow, specifically your focus on transparency and supply chain auditing, would be a strong fit for a broader feature we are developing on ethical innovation and accountability in philanthropy. I would love to schedule a brief 15-minute call to discuss your background and the current trajectory of your company. Are you available early next week? Best. Marin Cho. I stared at the screen. I read it 3 times. 30 under 40. It was the list every founder killed themselves to get on, the list that validated you, that washed away the sins of early failures. And Naomi Hale had recommended me. I sat back in my chair, the thrill of vanity warring with the cold knot of suspicion in my gut. Why Grant had spent the entire dinner humiliating her and using my failure as a prop. Why would she turn around and hand me a golden ticket? And then I remembered Grant's voice on the patio. She can't publish anything until after the merger. Naomi was working on something, and somehow, I was part of it. I didn't reply to Marin Cho. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed the number Grant had given me for the wedding guest list spreadsheet weeks ago. Naomi's cell. She answered on the second ring. This is Naomi. It's Ellie. I said. There was a pause. Then, her voice shifted. It wasn't the polite, dinner party voice. It was sharper, clearer. I was wondering when you would call. Did you get the email from Marin I did? I said, is this a joke, Naomi? Or is this an apology for my brother acting like an ass, because I don't need charity? It isn't charity, Ellie, she said, and it isn't an apology. Grant is who he is. I don't apologize for him. Then what is it I asked? Why would you pitch me for Forbes? You know my history. You know I am radioactive. You aren't radioactive, she said calmly. You are a pivot point. Marin is doing a real story on the list this year, not just the fluff pieces. She is looking at the intersection of tech and the new wave of impact investing. I waited, and I am looking into something too. Naomi said, I am looking into an ecosystem of impact funds and charitable foundations that might be misrepresenting their outcomes. Glossy brochures, fake metrics, washed reputations. My grip on the phone tightened. What does that have to do with me? Your company, Verity Flow, sits adjacent to it, she said, through an old partnership you had, and through Brightwell. I felt the blood drain from my face. Brightwell. She was going there. I am not talking about Brightwell, I said, my voice rising. I signed an NDA. I know you signed an NDA. Naomi cut in. I don't want you to break it. I want to buy you coffee. I want to explain why I recommended you. And I want to ask you one question about a company called Redwood Pike. Redwood Pike, Grant's firm. I looked around my empty office. The walls felt thin. If I meet you, I said, lowering my voice, no family gossip, no baiting me about Grant, No ambush interview. Agreed, she said immediately. Neutral ground. There is a coffee shop on 4th and Main. The Roost. It is quiet. Meet me there in an hour. I hung up. My hand was shaking. I stood up and paced the length of the small room. This was dangerous. Grant had said she was a dog with a bone. If I went to meet her, I was betraying him. I was stepping into the middle of whatever war they were fighting. But Grant had also said, she can't publish. He was hiding something. And he had used my humiliation to distract her at dinner. I grabbed my coat. As I was walking to the door, my phone buzzed again. A text message. The name on the screen stopped me dead. Lyle Brennan. Lyle had been my mentor at Brightwell. The man who had taught me everything about data analytics. The man who had quietly told me to resign before they fired me, saving me from a public termination hearing, but leaving me to take the fall in the press. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. I opened the message. If your name shows up anywhere near Redwood Pike or the Armitage Civic Trust, people will come for you again. Be careful. Ellie, the past isn't past. I stared at the words until they blurred. Armitage Civic Trust. I had never heard of it, but Lyle knew, and somehow, he knew I was getting close to it. I put the phone in my pocket. I locked the office door. And then I walked out into the cold morning air, heading toward the coffee shop, and toward the woman who was about to burn my brother's life to the ground. The Roost was the kind of coffee shop that took itself too seriously, with exposed brick walls and baristas who looked like they were working on dissertations in philosophy. It was also, as Naomi had promised, quiet. I found her at a table in the back corner, her back to the wall, a position that allowed her to survey the entire room. She wasn't looking at her phone. She was watching the door. When she saw me, she didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. I sat down across from her, keeping my coat on. It was a layer of protection, however thin. Black coffee, she said, sliding a ceramic mug toward me. I assumed you didn't want oat milk or syrup. You assumed correctly. I said. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into my cold fingers. Naomi looked different in the daylight, away from the soft, forgiving ambiance of my parents' dining room. She looked tired. There were faint violet shadows under her eyes, and the lines around her mouth were tighter. Grant tells me your Pulitzer was for a series on city procurement, I said, deciding to start on factual ground. Concrete, Naomi corrected. Specifically, how a syndicate of contractors was using substandard aggregate in low-income housing foundations while billing the city for premium materials. It wasn't glamorous. It was mostly reading invoices for 6 months. And now I asked, you have moved from concrete to charity. Naomi leaned forward, her voice dropping to a register that barely carried across the table. I am interested in how reputations are washed. Ellie, we live in an economy where perception is the only asset that matters. If a company poisons a river, they don't clean the river. They start a foundation dedicated to clean water, put a celebrity on the board, and buy a spread in a magazine. It is called impact washing. It is legal on paper, but in practice, it is rotten. She paused, watching me closely. I am tracking a specific network of these foundations. They move money from venture capital firms into social impact vehicles. The money cycles through, generates a few glossy reports about community uplift, and then cycles back to the investors as tax-advantaged returns. The actual impact is zero, but the reputational gain is massive. It buys them cover for everything else they are doing. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter, strong. And you think Redwood Pike is doing this? I think Redwood Pike is building a cathedral on a swamp, Naomi said. And I think they are terrified someone is going to check the foundation. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder. She didn't open it. She just rested her hand on it. I told you I didn't get your name from Grant. She said. I nodded. You said you saw it in a search. No, Naomi said. I lied. I didn't find you on Google. Ellie, I found you in a sealed discovery document from a lawsuit in the Southern District of New York. My stomach dropped. The air in the coffee shop seemed to vanish. What lawsuit? I whispered. The plaintiff was a nonprofit called the Beacon Initiative, Naomi said. They sued a data analytics firm for breach of contract 4 years ago. The case was settled out of court, and the files were sealed, but a clerk made a mistake and left a deposition list index in the public record for 12 hours. She tapped the folder. Your name was on the witness list for the defense, Eleanor Reed, senior data analyst. The defendant was Brightwell Analytics. I felt the blood drain from my face. Brightwell, the crater where my career had died. The Beacon Initiative, Naomi continued, her eyes never leaving mine, is now the primary beneficiary of the Armitage Civic Trust. And the Armitage Civic Trust is the philanthropic arm of Redwood Pike. She let the connection hang in the air between us. Grant's firm was funding the nonprofit that had been at the center of the disaster that ruined me. I gripped the table. Grant knows, I asked. Does he know about this connection? I don't know, Naomi admitted, but when I saw your name on that list, and then I met Grant and realized who his sister was, Ellie, the statistical probability of that being a coincidence is 0. Someone is reusing the architecture of your old failure. I looked at the folder. I felt a sudden, violent urge to run, to stand up, walk out, drive back to my office, and bury myself in payroll spreadsheets until the world went away. But I stayed, because for 3 years, I had been running, and I was still exactly where I started. It wasn't a breach of contract, I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. Naomi didn't speak. She just waited. The Beacon Initiative hired Brightwell to track the educational outcomes of their after-school coding program. I said, the words tumbling out. They had a $10 million grant pending, contingent on success metrics. They needed to show that 80% of their students went on to college. And what did the data show, Naomi asked? 42%. I said, it was a good program. It helped kids, but it didn't hit the grant threshold. I ran the numbers 3 times. I checked the SQL queries myself. The data was clean. 42%. I looked down at my hands. My boss at Brightwell told me to exclude the dropouts from the denominator. He said they didn't count as participants if they didn't finish the year. If we removed them, the success rate jumped to 85%. Fraud, Naomi said. I refused. I said, I told him I wouldn't sign the report. I sent an email to compliance. 2 days later, I was called into HR. They told me I wasn't a culture fit. They said I was difficult, combative, unstable. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. They fired me on a Friday. On Monday, the report went out with the inflated numbers. 6 months later, the Beacon Initiative sued Brightwell anyway, alleging we hadn't provided holistic support. It was a mess. But by then, the narrative was set. I was the crazy analyst who couldn't work with a team. I looked up at Naomi, expecting to see pity. Pity was what I usually got, right before people stopped returning my calls. But Naomi wasn't looking at me with pity. She was looking at me with focus. She had pulled a notebook from her pocket and was writing something down. You sent an email to compliance, she asked, not looking up. Yes, but nothing happened. Do you still have it? No. Brightwell wiped my laptop remotely before I even got to the parking lot. Naomi stopped writing. She looked at me. I believe you. Ellie? 3 words. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them until she said them. My throat tightened, and I had to look away to keep from crying in the middle of a coffee shop. Why, I asked. Why do you believe me? I have no proof. Because the pattern matches, Naomi said. She opened the folder now. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a printout of a slide from a Redwood Pike investor deck. It showed a graph with a line rocketing upward. The title was Social Return on Investment Beacon Initiative Pilot. The footnote at the bottom of the slide read, Verified by third-party audit. They are using the same trick, Naomi said. They are taking broken systems, painting them gold with fake data, and selling the success story to investors who want to feel good about themselves. And Grant is right in the middle of it. I stared at the slide. It was a lie, a beautiful, glossy, expensive lie. If I help you, I said, Grant will hate me. He won't just be angry, Naomi, he will destroy me. He thinks family loyalty is the only religion. Naomi reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was cool, her grip steady. "Grant doesn't love you, Ellie," she said softly. "He owns you. There is a difference. I didn't hear from Grant for 2 days." The silence was worse than the shouting. It felt like the drop in pressure before a tornado touches down. I tried to focus on work. Verity Flow was in a delicate place. We were onboarding a new client, a mid-sized apparel brand that actually cared about where their cotton came from. It was the kind of work I was proud of: messy, granular, real. On Wednesday afternoon, I was in the middle of a code review when my phone lit up. Grant calling. I took a breath, counted to 3, and answered. "Hello? Grant? You are seeing her," he said. "No hello. No pleasantries." His voice was tight, clipped. "I saw her for coffee," I said, keeping my voice level. She wanted to explain the Forbes introduction. "Don't lie to me." He snapped. "I have eyes. I know you met her at the Roost. I know you were there for an hour." A chill went down my spine. How did he know? "Are you tracking me?" I asked. "I am looking out for you," he shouted, the veneer of calm cracking. "Do you have any idea what she is doing? She is using you. She is mining you for dirt so she can write some hit piece that ruins my merger. She doesn't care about your little startup. She cares about a headline. She seemed pretty genuine to me. Grant, she thinks there is something wrong with the Armitage Trust." There was a silence on the other end, a long, heavy silence. "What did she tell you about the trust?" he asked. His voice had dropped. The anger was gone, replaced by something colder. "Fear. She thinks they are inflating metrics," I said, testing him. Grant laughed. "But it sounded forced. That is ridiculous. Everyone puffs up their numbers. Ellie, it is marketing. That is how the world works. You of all people should know that. You tried to be a saint at Brightwell and look where it got you. Unemployed and living in a studio apartment." I closed my eyes. He knew exactly where to hit. I am not unemployed, Grant, and I own my apartment. "Listen to me," he said. "I am warning you. Do not let her turn our family into content. If you talk to her again, you are betraying me. End of story." He hung up. I stared at the phone. Everyone puffs up their numbers. That wasn't a denial. That was a justification. Naomi was right. His defensiveness wasn't the anxiety of a fiancé worried about wedding drama. It was the panic of a man who knew there was a body buried in the basement. The invitation arrived via email an hour later. It was a masterpiece of digital design, heavy cardstock animation, gold serif font, a subtly looping video background of the New York skyline. Redwood Pike Capital invites you to a celebration of partnership future horizons. Saturday, November 14th, 7:00 p.m., the Pierre Hotel. Honoring the upcoming union of Grant Reed and Naomi Hale. I stared at the screen. A celebration Grant had just told me that Naomi was trying to ruin him. Now they were hosting a party together. My phone buzzed again. A text from Grant. "You need to come to this. It will look weird if you aren't there. People will talk. Wear the blue dress. It looks good for you." I felt a wave of nausea. "It looks good for you." The unspoken threat was clear: if you don't come. You look guilty. If you don't come, you are the unstable sister again. I was about to reply when another email pinged into my inbox. This one wasn't gold and glossy. It was stark. Plain text. Subject urgent. Compliance audit, notification. Verity Flow Inc. From audit dash, no reply at vendor dash. Integrity dash. Bureau.org. Dear Ms. Reed, this notice serves to inform you that Verity Flow Incorporated has been selected for a random compliance audit regarding your recent application for the Small Business Innovation Grant. Please provide the following documentation within 48 hours. 1. Full server access logs for the past 36 months. 2. Unredacted client contracts for fiscal years 2023 to 2025. 3. Personal bank statements for all majority shareholders. 4. Source code repository access for validation of IP ownership. Failure to comply will result in immediate disqualification and potential referral to regulatory bodies. I read the list twice. My hands started to shake. This wasn't a standard audit. This was an autopsy. Asking for source code access, asking for personal bank statements. This was absurdly invasive. It would take me a week just to gather the files. They wanted it in 48 hours. I looked at the sender, the Vendor Integrity Bureau. I had applied for a small grant 6 months ago, a $5,000 boost for server costs. I had forgotten about it. Now, suddenly, I was being audited. I realized with a sick clarity what was happening. This wasn't random. This was a denial of service attack on my time. Someone wanted me buried in paperwork. Someone wanted me too busy to talk to Naomi. I grabbed my bag and ran out of the office. I couldn't be there. I felt watched. I met Naomi in the reading room of the public library. It was the only place I could think of where no one would be recording us. The high ceilings and the smell of old paper made me feel slightly safer. Naomi was sitting at a long wooden table, reading a book on forensic accounting. When I sat down, she slid a piece of paper toward me. It was a printout of the email I had received from the Vendor Integrity Bureau. "How did you get this?" I asked, terrified. "I didn't hack you, if that is what you're asking." Naomi said quietly, "I have an alert set up for the Vendor Integrity Bureau. It is a shell entity. Ellie. It is run by a law firm that represents Redwood Pike." I put my head in my hands. "They are trying to crush me. They want my source code." "They don't want your code," Naomi said. "They want your fear. They want you to panic and spend the next week gathering documents so you stop asking questions." She tapped the table. "Ignore it. Ignore it." I looked up at her. "They said they would refer me to regulatory bodies. They won't," she said, "because the Bureau doesn't have any regulatory power. It is a scarecrow. If you engage with them, you validate them. If you ignore them, they have to escalate, and that exposes them." She looked over my shoulder. "I brought someone who can explain it better than I can. Ellie, this is Jessa." I turned. A woman was standing behind me. She was young, maybe 25, wearing an oversized hoodie and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. "Hi," Jessa whispered. She sat down quickly, pulling a laptop out of her backpack. "Jessa is a risk analyst," Naomi explained. "She worked at Redwood Pike until 2 months ago. I was a junior analyst," Jessa corrected, her voice trembling. "I mostly just checked spreadsheets for formatting errors, but I saw things. What things I asked." Jessa opened her laptop. She typed a password that seemed to be 40 characters long. There was a project folder on the shared drive. She said, "It was restricted. Only partners could open it, but someone messed up the permissions on the backup server. I was doing a routine archive sweep, and I saw the file names." She turned the screen toward me. It was a list of file directories. Project Clean Slate, Project Ironclad, Project Gullwing. I stared at the screen. "Gullwing," I said. "Like the car? Or the bird?" Naomi said. Jessa pointed to the screen. Gullwing wasn't a folder of investment strategies. It was a folder of macros, scripts. I opened one. It was a script designed to take a dataset, specifically survey results, and normalize the distribution curve. It automatically deleted the bottom 15% of data points and smoothed the rest to look organic. My mouth went dry. It was an automated cheating machine. "It is a tool for manufacturing success," Jessa said, and it was linked to the Armitage Trust reporting portal. I looked at the date on the file. Modified October 12, 2022. "That date," I murmured, what Naomi asked. I closed my eyes, searching the chaotic filing cabinet of my memory. Gullwing. I had seen that word before. Not recently. Years ago. I stood up. "I need to go to my storage unit." My storage unit was in Queens, a metal box filled with the detritus of my life before the crash. Old furniture, boxes of books, and a plastic bin marked Brightwell. Personal. I sat on the cold concrete floor under the buzzing fluorescent light, digging through the bin. I found old notebooks, a coffee mug, a stress ball, and at the bottom, a stack of hard drives. When Brightwell fired me, they wiped my laptop. But I was paranoid. I had always been paranoid. Every Friday, I used to export my email archive to a personal drive, just in case. I pulled out a silver drive and plugged it into my laptop. The fan whirred to life. I searched the archive. Gullwing. The search bar spun. One result found. It was an email I had forwarded to myself, from sysadmin@brightwellanalytics.com to e.read@brightwellanalytics.com, subject FDD, Gullwing discrepancy. Ticket number 4099. Date September 14th, 2022. I opened it. It was a thread I had started. I had found a strange script running on the server, consuming massive resources. I had flagged it to IT, asking what Gullwing was. The reply from the head of IT was short system error. Script deleted. Please disregard. But I hadn't disregarded it. I had forwarded the thread to the compliance hotline email address, to ethics@brightwellanalytics.com, subject concerns regarding unauthorized script Gullwing altering client data. I stared at the screen. I had reported it. I had seen the name, not knowing what it was, just knowing it was wrong. And 1 week later, I was fired. It wasn't just the Beacon Initiative report. It was this. I had stumbled onto the engine itself. Gullwing wasn't just a script. It was the protocol, the systemic way they fixed the numbers. And when I poked it, the machine swatted me down. I took a screenshot. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely control the trackpad. I called Naomi. I found it. I said, "We met back at the Roost." It was late. The shop empty except for the barista sweeping the floor. I showed Naomi and Jessa the email. Jessa gasped when she saw the date. "This proves it," Jessa said. "This proves Gullwing has been active for years. It proves Brightwell was the testing ground. And Redwood Pike bought the technology," Naomi said, her eyes cold and hard. "They didn't just invest in the nonprofit. They bought the lie machine." She looked at me. "This is the smoking gun. Ellie, this ties your firing directly to a systemic fraud that is still happening today." I looked at the screen, at the innocent younger version of myself who had just tried to do her job. I felt a wave of grief for her. She hadn't stood a chance. "I will help you," I said. "I will give you the drive. I will go on the record." Naomi nodded, reaching for the drive. "But," I said, pulling it back, "I have conditions. Name them." Naomi said, "I won't name the innocent people." I said, "The junior analysts, the project managers who didn't know what they were looking at. I know who they are. I won't let them get burned. We go after the executives. We go after the people who signed the checks." Naomi looked at me. "Agreed. The target is the machinery, not the bystanders. And one more thing." I said, "Yes, I am going to that party." I said, "The celebration." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "You want to go into the lion's den?" I looked at the email on my screen. "I am not hiding anymore." Naomi. "Grant wants me to be there." "Fine. I will be there. But I'm not going as his sister. I am going as a witness." Naomi smiled. It was the first time I had seen her really smile. It was sharp, dangerous, and beautiful. "Then you better wear the blue dress," she said, "because we are going to need all the armor we can get." I sat back in the chair. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like something else, something cold and practical. I wasn't the girl who crashed anymore. I was the black box recorder, and I was about to be found. The Pierre Hotel ballroom smelled of white lilies and expensive desperation. It was a scent I knew well from my childhood, the specific olfactory signature of people with too much money trying to prove they had souls. The chandeliers cast a golden, forgiving light over the crowd, smoothing out wrinkles and sharpening the edges of diamond earrings. I stood near a pillar, holding a glass of sparkling water like a shield. I was wearing the blue dress, just as Grant had demanded, though I had chosen it for Naomi. Not for him. It was stiff silk, dark as the midnight ocean, and it made me feel armored. The room was packed with the elite of the city's financial and philanthropic sectors. Men in bespoke tuxedos clapped one another on the shoulder with the force of closing a deal, while women in couture gowns drifted between clusters like exotic fish. On stage, a massive screen projected a loop of smiling children, drone shots of solar farms, and bold sans serif text, impact, integrity, future. Grant was in his element. He moved through the crowd with a predator's grace, one hand resting possessively on Naomi's lower back, the other gesturing broadly as he introduced her to partners. Naomi looked stunning in emerald green, but her eyes were scanning the room with the cold precision of a surveillance camera. She wasn't drinking. She wasn't smiling with her eyes. She was working. Ellie. Grant's voice cut through the ambient hum of conversation. He waved me over, his smile tight and bright. He was standing with two older men who looked like they owned significant portions of the coastline. "Gentlemen, this is my little sister." "Ellie," Grant announced, sliding his arm around my shoulders. The weight of it felt heavy, suffocating. "She is the tech genius of the family, runs a cute little startup in the supply chain space." I felt my jaw tighten. Cute little startup. Verity Flow processed $3 million in compliance audits last year. We were the only reason 2 major footwear brands had caught child labor violations in their Tier 3 factories. "It is nice to meet you," I said, extending my hand to the taller man. "And it is Verity Flow. We specialize in supply chain transparency." "Oh, transparency," the man chuckled, taking my hand with a limp, damp grip. A dangerous business these days. Everyone wants to know where the sausage is made until they see the butcher. Grant laughed too loudly. "Exactly. Ellie is all about the details. She loves the weeds. We are trying to teach her to see the big picture." "Right." "Elle." He squeezed my shoulder, a sharp pinch disguised as affection. I swallowed the retort that rose in my throat. I looked at Naomi. She was watching Grant with a look of microscopic disdain, but she stayed silent. She knew, as I did, that making a scene here would only give him ammunition. "I am going to get a refill," I said, slipping out from under Grant's arm. I moved toward the bar, my heart hammering a slow, angry rhythm against my ribs. I needed to observe. I needed to see the machinery Naomi had talked about. As I waited for the bartender to pour another water, a woman appeared at my elbow. She was striking, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and a white tuxedo jacket that radiated authority. "You must be Ellie Reed," she said. Her voice was warm, melodic. I turned. "Yes, Celeste Armitage," she said, offering a hand. "Director of the Armitage Civic Trust. Grant talks about you all the time. He says you have a brilliant mind for data. The Armitage Civic Trust, the heart of the beast." I took her hand. It was dry and strong. "He is very proud of you." Celeste continued, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "And I must say, I have been reading up on your work, the way you visualize compliance gaps. It is artistry, truly. Thank you," I said, wary. I didn't think foundation directors spent their time reading technical documentation for logistics software. "We are actually looking for partners for a new pilot program." Celeste said, "We are funding a clean water initiative in the Delta, and we need a third-party validator. Someone with flexibility." I stiffened. "Flexibility." "Well, you know how it is," she said, her smile not wavering. "Donor expectations are so specific these days. They want to see the trajectory of success immediately. Sometimes the raw data is a little messy. It doesn't tell the story clearly enough. We need a partner who knows how to adjust the weighting of certain metrics to make sure the narrative lands." She said it so casually. Adjust the weighting. Make sure the narrative lands. It was the same language my boss at Brightwell had used. Exclude the dropouts. Smooth the curve. Tell the story. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. She was asking me to cook the books. Here, in the middle of a ballroom, wearing a $5,000 jacket, "We believe in raw data at Verity Flow," I said, keeping my voice level. "The story is whatever the numbers say." Celeste's smile didn't fade, but the warmth evaporated from her eyes. "Of course," she said, "integrity is so important. But surely you understand that data is open to interpretation. Context is everything." "Ellie, we wouldn't want a promising program to lose funding just because of a few statistical anomalies. Would we?" She patted my arm. "Think about it. We would love to have a read on the payroll. It would make Grant so happy. She drifted away before I could answer, vanishing into the crowd like a shark sliding back into the deep. I stood there, gripping my glass. It wasn't just a request. It was a test, and maybe a threat. I found Naomi 20 minutes later near the terrace doors. She was typing furiously into her phone. "Celeste Armitage just propositioned me to commit fraud," I whispered, leaning against the wall next to her. Naomi didn't look up. Did she use the word adjust? Yes. "Standard operating procedure," Naomi murmured. "She is the gatekeeper. If you play ball, you get a grant. If you don't, you get frozen out. But listen to me, Ellie, I just got a text from my source in Treasury." She turned the screen toward me. "I have been tracking the vendor payments for their flagship urban renewal project." Naomi said, "They are routing 40% of the budget through 3 vendors for consulting fees." I looked at the names on the screen. Apex Strategy, Blue Horizon Group, Vector Analytics. My blood ran cold. Vector Analytics. I said, my voice trembling, "You know them?" "They were a subcontractor for Brightwell." I said, "We used them for data scraping on the Beacon Initiative project, the one I got fired for." Naomi cursed softly. "If Armitage is using Vector to wash the money," I said, realizing the horror of the geometry, "and Vector still has my old user logs from the Brightwell days, then they can make it look like you are still involved." Naomi finished. "They can link your name to the current fraud. They can say you built the backdoor they are using." I felt like the walls of the ballroom were closing in. They weren't just reusing the method, they were reusing the scapegoat. The sabotage didn't wait long. It arrived on Monday morning, precise and devastating. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on the legitimate audit I was running for the apparel client, when my email pinged, "Subject termination of contract, effective immediately." From Sarah Jenkins, VP of Operations, GreenThread. Logistics. GreenThread was our biggest client. They accounted for 30% of our monthly revenue. I opened the email, my hands shaking. "Dear Ellie, in light of recent information brought to our attention regarding your professional history and data integrity practices, GreenThread is exercising its right to terminate our service agreement effective immediately. We cannot risk our compliance standing by partnering with a vendor whose leadership has a documented history of outcome manipulation. Attached is the documentation provided to our board. Regards." Sarah attached was a PDF. I opened it. It was a dossier, 12 pages long. It started with a summary of the Brightwell lawsuit public information, but then it went deeper. There were screenshots of internal Brightwell emails, screenshots of Slack messages I had sent 3 years ago, taken out of context to make me look hysterical and incompetent. Ellie Reed. "I don't care what the client wants. The numbers don't work," captioned Reed, refusing to align with client objectives. Ellie Reed. "I am going to delete the whole dataset if I can't fix this bug." Captioned Reed threatening data destruction during a mental health episode. I stared at the screen, tears of rage pricking my eyes. These were real messages. I remembered writing them. The first was me defending the truth. The second was a joke I made to a colleague at midnight when we were exhausted. But here, black and white, they looked like the rantings of a dangerous, unstable employee. This wasn't public record. Someone had gone into the Brightwell archives. Someone with admin access. I grabbed my keys. I didn't think. I just moved. I drove to Grant's office in Midtown. I didn't have an appointment. I walked past the receptionist, ignoring her calls, and pushed open the double glass doors to the partner wing. Grant was in his office, standing by the window, looking out at the city he thought he owned. He turned when I slammed the door behind me. "Ellie," he said, frowning, "you can't just barge in here. I have a meeting with the pension fund guys in 10 minutes. I threw the printout of the dossier onto his desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped near his hand. "Who sent this?" I demanded. Grant looked down at the papers. He didn't pick them up. He didn't look surprised. "GreenThread fired me this morning," I said, my voice shaking. "They got this anonymous package. It has internal Brightwell screenshots." Grant, private messages. Who has access to those? Grant sighed. A long, weary sound. He walked over to his chair and sat down, gesturing for me to do the same. Sit down, Ellie. You are making a scene. I am not sitting down, I yelled. Someone is torching my company. Is it Pike? Is it Armitage? It is damage control, Grant said calmly. I froze. What? Grant picked up a silver pen and turned it over in his fingers. We knew Naomi was digging. Ellie, we knew she was talking to you. We couldn't take the risk that you would start feeding her things, misremembered things. I stared at him. I felt like I was looking at a stranger. You did this? I didn't send it, Grant said. But I knew the firm was preparing a containment strategy. Look, Elle, it is a warning shot. That is all. It is to remind you that your glass house is very fragile. He looked up at me, his eyes cold and pragmatic. You should have moved on. Ellie, you should have stayed quiet. If you make noise, if you help Naomi write her little story, you drag all of us down. Do you understand? The merger is worth billions, billions. I am not going to let your lingering bitterness about a job you lost 3 years ago derail my future. My bitterness, I whispered. Grant, they wanted me to commit fraud, just like Celeste Armitage asked me to commit fraud on Saturday. Grow up, Grant snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. Everybody adjusts the numbers. It is how the world works. You are the only one who is too stupid to play the game. He stood up, towering over the desk. You want to be a martyr? Fine. But don't expect me to pay for your cross. You choose right now. Ellie, you are either my sister, or you are a liability, and we liquidate liabilities. I looked at him. I saw the fear behind the aggression. He was terrified. He was a small man in a big office, terrified that the truth would make him ordinary. I took a step back. I am not your liability. Grant, I said quietly, and I am definitely not your sister. Not anymore. I turned and walked out. He didn't call after me. I went straight to Naomi's apartment. It was a pre-war walk-up in Brooklyn, filled with books and stacks of paper. It smelled of coffee and old dust. Naomi took one look at my face and poured me a glass of whiskey. I sat on her couch, holding the glass with both hands to stop the shaking. I told her everything, the dossier, the cancellation, Grant's words. We liquidate liabilities. Naomi listened without interrupting. When I finished, she stood up and walked to a locked filing cabinet in the corner. She unlocked it and pulled out a single document. I wasn't going to show you this yet, she said. I wanted to verify the signature first, but you need to see it. She handed me the paper. It was a memo on Redwood Pike letterhead. Confidential. Subject merger risk assessment. Reputational hazards. I scanned the text. It was a strategy document outlining potential threats to the merger. Under the section titled Loose Ends, Brightwell Acquisition, there was a bullet point potential for whistleblower narrative regarding legacy metrics manipulation. Strategy. Preemptive neutralization of credibility. Leverage existing HR records to frame potential sources as unreliable, and at the bottom of the page, there were 3 signatures. The first was the CEO of Redwood. The second was the head of legal. The third signature was a jagged, aggressive scrawl I had seen on birthday cards for 30 years. Grant Reed. I stared at the signature. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sharp, tearing sensation. He signed it. I whispered, "He didn't just know." Naomi said gently, "He authorized it. He gave them permission to use your past against you. He helped design the cage." Ellie, I put the paper down on the coffee table. I felt sick. My brother, the boy who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who had walked me down the aisle at my graduation. He had signed a piece of paper that gave a corporation permission to destroy my life, just to protect his bonus. He sold me, I said, for a partnership track. Naomi sat down next to me. I am sorry. Ellie, I looked at her. Does he know you have this? No. If he did, he would have called off the wedding already. He thinks he can still charm me into silence. He thinks I am just a trophy with a notebook. She took the glass from my hand and set it down. Ellie, look at me. I looked at her. Her dark eyes were fierce. You can walk away, she said. You can go to Green Thread, beg for your contract back, sign whatever NDA Grant puts in front of you, and disappear. I will still publish. I will find another way to prove the fraud. I won't judge you. I want you safe. She paused. But I won't pretend that safety is the same thing as silence. If you stay silent, they own you forever. Every time you get a new client, every time you try to build something, they will be there, holding this over your head. I looked at the memo, preemptive neutralization. They had already decided I was nothing, just a risk to be managed. I can't go back. I said, they scorched the earth. Then we fight. Naomi said, the next day. Naomi sent me to a lawyer Jessa had recommended. His name was David Cohen, and his office was a chaotic room above a deli in Queens. He didn't look like a high-powered attorney. He looked like a man who enjoyed arguing with parking enforcement. He read through my old severance agreement from Brightwell. Chewing on the end of a pen, standard boilerplate, he grunted. Non-disparagement, confidentiality. They wrapped you up tight. Miss Reed, if you breathe a word about the internal data, they can sue you for every dime you have ever made. I slumped in the chair. So I'm stuck. Cohen stopped chewing. He looked up, a glint in his eye. Usually, yes. But there is a doctrine called fraud in the inducement. What does that mean? It means you can't be bound by a contract if you were tricked into signing it. He said, they fired you for performance issues and cultural fit, right? That is what the separation agreement says. Yes. But if we can prove that the real reason for termination was retaliation for reporting illegal activity, specifically the Gullwing script, then the entire premise of the separation agreement is fraudulent. They lied about why they were firing you to get you to sign the hush money deal. He tapped the paper. If we can prove the fraud, the NDA dissolves. You become a witness to a crime, not a disgruntled ex-employee breaking a contract. If we can prove it. I said, we have the email you sent to compliance. Cohen said, the one you found on the hard drive. That is the key. It proves you reported the specific mechanism of the fraud before they fired you. It establishes the timeline. He leaned back. It is risky. If we lose, you pay their legal fees, and Redwood Pike has expensive lawyers. But if you want to speak, this is the door. I thought about the dossier. I thought about Grant's signature on the risk memo. I thought about the thousands of people pouring money into the Armitage Trust, thinking they were helping the world, while Grant and his friends bought summer homes. I am not afraid of their lawyers. I said, I am afraid of being quiet. Cohen smiled. Good answer. I went back to my office. It was quiet. The Green Thread contract was gone. The revenue was gone. I was bleeding money. But I had something else now. I had clarity. I opened a new file on my secure drive. I named it Timeline. I started to type. October 14th, 2022. Discovery of Gullwing script. October 21st, 2022. Termination from Brightwell. November 12th, 2025. Engagement dinner. Grant confirms pressure on Naomi. November 14th, 2025. Meeting with Celeste Armitage. Request to adjust metrics. November 16th, 2025. Receipt of threat dossier. I logged every meeting, every request, every suspicious email. I went back through my calendar and cross-referenced dates. I pulled the metadata from the files Jessa had provided. I wasn't just remembering, I was building a case. My fear was still there, a cold stone in my stomach, but it was changing. It was condensing. It was turning into strategy. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to be precise. I was going to be the thing they feared most, a boring, meticulous woman who wrote everything down. I picked up my phone and texted Naomi. I saw the lawyer. The NDA is glass. Let's break it. A moment later, her reply came. See you on the other side. I closed my laptop. The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across the floor. I was alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt ready. The hard drive from my storage unit was a digital graveyard, a chaotic archive of a life I had tried to delete. I spent 3 nights sifting through it, my eyes burning from the blue light of the laptop screen, looking for the ghost in the machine. Jessa had given me the name of the script Gullwing, but I needed to find the hands that had typed it. It was 2 a.m. on a Thursday when I found the artifact. It wasn't a code file. It was a screenshot I had taken by accident, a habit I had developed when my system would freeze during high-volume data pushes. I had captured the dashboard of the Brightwell internal server just moments before a crash. I zoomed in on the image, in the bottom right corner. There was a timestamp, October 12th, 2022, 14:45, and right next to it, under the active sessions log, was a user ID I didn't recognize. SVC_VECT_07. It was a service account, a backdoor login used by third-party vendors to upload data without going through the standard validation protocols. I pulled up the vendor list Jessa had given me. The list of shell companies currently being funded by the Armitage Civic Trust to manage their impact metrics. There it was, Vector Analytics. My heart hammered against my ribs. SVC_VECT. This service account belonged to Vector Analytics. They had been logged into the Brightwell server the exact week the data for the Beacon initiative was altered. They were the ones who had injected the Gullwing script, and now, 3 years later, Vector Analytics was the primary recipient of grant money from Redwood Pike's philanthropic arm. It was a perfect circle. The same hands that had framed me were now being paid to build Grant's reputation. I sat back in my chair, the silence of my apartment heavy and suffocating. This wasn't just a similar method. It was the same crew. They hadn't just reused the code. They had reused the contractors. It was a bridge of evidence that spanned from my ruined career directly to Grant's upcoming merger. I took a screenshot of the screenshot. I saved it to 3 different cloud servers. Then I closed the laptop, knowing I would not sleep. Naomi looked like she hadn't slept either. We met the next afternoon in the back of a dim bistro in the village, a place where people went to have affairs or breakups. Naomi was staring into a glass of sparkling water, as if she could divine the future from the bubbles. "I lost a source," she said without preamble. "The former comptroller for the City Housing Authority. He was going to go on record about how Armitage lobbied for zoning changes." "What happened?" I asked. "He called me this morning. Said he has a daughter starting an internship at a bank that Redwood Pike just acquired. He said he couldn't risk complicating her trajectory." She looked up at me, her eyes dark with frustration. "It is the reach, Ellie. They are everywhere. It isn't just money. It is influence. They can touch your life in a dozen invisible ways before you even realize you are in the blast zone." I nodded. I knew that feeling well. "I found something," I said quietly. I slid a printout of the dashboard screenshot across the table. I explained the service account, the timestamp, the connection to Vector Analytics. Naomi studied the paper for a long time. When she looked up, there was no triumph in her face, only a grim validation. "This ties the timeline," she said. "It proves intent. It proves it wasn't a glitch." She took a sip of water, her hand trembling slightly. "I have been thinking about Grant," she said softly. I stiffened. "What about him I have been thinking about, why he proposed?" I looked at her. She was a beautiful, brilliant woman. It wasn't hard to see why someone would want to marry her. "Because he loves you," I suggested, though the words felt flimsy even as I said them. Naomi shook her head slowly. "Grant loves winning, Ellie. He loves acquisition, but I think there is something else. I think he proposed because he knew I was looking into the industry. He knew I was getting close to the ecosystem he plays in." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "If I am his wife, I am compromised. If I am his wife, my editors will question my objectivity. If I am his wife, he has legal privileges. He thought if he brought me inside the house, I would stop throwing rocks at the windows." I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a terrifying thought that a marriage proposal could be a strategic containment measure. "He assumes proximity equals ownership," I said. Naomi looked at me sharply. "That is exactly it. He thinks if he holds me close enough, he can control what I see." I looked down at the table. "That is how he has always been with family," I said. "He does it to my parents. He buys them trips, pays for the roof repairs. handles their investments, and in exchange, they aren't allowed to question him, they aren't allowed to be disappointed. He buys the right to be the hero. Naomi reached across the table and touched my hand. And now he is trying to buy you, she said. Isn't he? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The offer came 2 days later. Grant asked to meet me at a private club in Midtown, a place with leather walls and waiters who moved like ghosts. He was already seated when I arrived, looking relaxed, a tumbler of scotch in front of him. "Ellie," he said, standing to kiss my cheek. "You look tired. Are you eating enough?" "I am fine." "Grant," I said, sitting down. He signaled for a waiter. "Bring her the Cobb salad and an iced tea." I didn't argue. I let him order. I let him set the stage. "I have been doing some thinking," he said, leaning back in the leather chair. "About you, about Verity Flow. I know you took a hit with the Green Thread contract. That was unfortunate." "Unfortunate," I repeated. "That is one word for it. Look, business is rough," he said, waving a hand. "But family is family, and I hate seeing you struggle. I really do. You are smart. You are just misdirected." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. It was bound in a blue folder. "We are spinning off a new subsidiary post-merger," he said. "Data optimization for our logistics portfolio. We need a director of operations." He slid the folder toward me. "It is a $300,000 base salary. Ellie, plus equity, plus a signing bonus that would wipe out your student loans and capitalize Verity Flow for 2 years." I stared at the blue folder. $300,000. It was more money than I had ever seen. It was safety. It was validation. It was a muzzle. I opened the folder. I didn't look at the salary. I flipped to the back, to the legal terms. Intellectual property assignment, non-compete, non-disclosure. The NDA section was 5 pages long. It covered everything, past, present, and future. It specifically stated that the employee agreed to refrain from discussing any prior professional interactions with the parent company or its affiliates. If I signed this, I couldn't talk to Naomi. I couldn't talk to the lawyer. I couldn't even talk to myself without breaching contract. I looked up at Grant. He was watching me with a benevolent smile, the smile of a king tossing a coin to a beggar. "It is a great opportunity. He said. "We can put the past behind us. A clean slate. You just sign. We fold Verity Flow into the new entity. And you are safe. You are back on the winning team. Family helping family." I said, "Exactly." I closed the folder. I didn't slide it back. I just rested my hand on it. "This isn't a job offer, Grant. This is a settlement agreement dressed up as a promotion." Grant's smile faltered. "Don't be cynical." "I am not being cynical. I am being accurate. You are buying my silence for $300,000 a year." Grant's eyes hardened. The warmth evaporated. "You are worth a lot less than that." "Ellie," he said coldly, "I am overpaying because I care about Mom and Dad. I don't want them to watch their daughter self-destruct again. Again," I said. "You mean like I did at Brightwell? When you signed the risk memo advising them to discredit me?" Grant went very still. "Who showed you that?" he whispered. "It doesn't matter," I said. I stood up. "I am not signing this. Grant, I don't want your money. And I don't want your protection." Grant didn't stand up. He looked up at me, and his face twisted into an expression I hadn't seen since we were teenagers, fighting over the remote control in the den. It was a look of pure, petulant fury. "You are making a mistake," he hissed. "You think you are brave. You are just ungrateful. I built this life. I built the reputation that lets you walk into rooms like this. If you tear me down, you go down with me." I looked around the club, at the rich men in their leather chairs, drinking their expensive scotch. "Then I guess I will go down," I said. I walked out. I didn't look back, but I could feel his eyes on me, burning a hole between my shoulder blades. My parents called that night. It was a conference call, a unified front. "Ellie," my mother said, her voice trembling, "Grant told us he offered you a wonderful job. He said you walked out on him. Mom, it wasn't a job. I said, pacing my small living room. It was a bribe. Oh, Ellie, stop it. My father cut in. His voice was stern, disappointed. Your brother is trying to help you. He has worked so hard for this merger. He is under so much pressure. Why do you have to be so difficult? The word followed me like a shadow. He is lying to people. Dad, I said, he is hurting people. We don't want to hear about business politics. My mother said, we want our family to be whole. She is intense. Ellie, she is putting ideas in your head. Don't let her ruin this engagement. Grant deserves to be happy. What about me? I asked, my voice cracking. Do I deserve to be happy, or do I just deserve to be quiet? There was a silence on the line, a long, painful silence. We just want peace. Ellie, my father said finally, just make peace with your brother, please. I hung up the phone. I sat on the floor and cried, not because I was sad, but because I realized the truth. My parents loved me, but they loved the version of me that didn't cause problems. They loved the version of the family that looked good in a Christmas card. If the truth threatened that image, they would choose the image every time. Love, I realized, could be a force that asks you to disappear. The pre-wedding gathering was held 2 nights later at a gallery in Chelsea. It was hosted by one of Naomi's colleagues, an editor at The New Yorker. The room was full of journalists, authors, and academics, a different crowd than the Pierre Hotel. These people didn't have money, but they had cultural capital. I arrived late. I saw Naomi immediately. She was wearing a simple black dress. Holding court in the center of the room, people were leaning in to hear her speak. She looked vibrant, alive, respected. Grant stood at the edge of the circle. He was holding a drink, his smile fixed and brittle. He looked out of place. Here, his expensive suit and his private equity vocabulary didn't hold weight. Here, he was just the husband, the accessory. I walked over to him. Hello, Grant, I said. He looked at me with flat, dead eyes. You came. I was invited. I said. He took a large swallow of his drink. Look at them, he muttered. They think they are so important because they write paragraphs. They don't build anything. They just criticize the people who do. He is insecure. I realized. He is terrified of her world because he can't buy it. A woman with thick glasses turned to Grant. So, you are the lucky man. How do you handle being with someone who can see through walls? It was a compliment to Naomi, but Grant took it as a challenge. Oh, I handle it, Grant said, his voice too loud. It is a full-time job. Honestly, you know Naomi. She interrogates everyone, even me, even family. He laughed, looking around for validation. She treats a dinner conversation like a deposition. He continued, gaining steam. I have to plead the fifth just to choose a restaurant. It is exhausted, really. But hey, someone has to keep her grounded in reality. Right? The circle went quiet. It wasn't a charming anecdote. It was a public undermining. He was trying to shrink her, right there in front of her peers. Naomi looked at him. Her expression didn't change. She didn't look hurt. She looked bored. I think that is my cue, she said calmly. She set her glass down on a passing tray. Grant, you have had a long week, she said. You should stay and relax. I am going to head home. She turned to the hostess, thanked her, and walked out. She didn't look back at him. She didn't apologize for him. She just removed herself from his narrative. Grant stood there, his smile frozen, the room's judgment pressing in on him. He looked small. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid of him. I felt pity. I followed Naomi out. She was waiting for a cab on the corner. He is drowning, I said, standing beside her. He is flailing, she corrected. And he doesn't care who he hits. She turned to me. I found out why the merger is happening now. Ellie, specifically now. Why there is a regulatory inquiry opening next month into the capital reserves of Redwood Pike. She said, they are leveraged to the hilt. If they don't merge, they don't have the liquidity to pass the stress test. The entire house of cards falls down. So the merger is a bailout. The merger is a cover-up, she said. And the philanthropy. The Armitage Trust. It is a distraction. They are pumping out these impact wins to flood the search results, so that when regulators or journalists look at the firm, all they see is charity work and innovation. It is the playbook. I said, overwhelm with noise, charm the investors, smear the critics, repeat. Exactly, Naomi said, and we are the critics. The final piece of the puzzle came from Jessa the next morning. She met me at my office. She looked terrified, as usual, but she had a hard drive in her hand. I decrypted the rest of the Gullwing folder. She said, and it isn't just a spreadsheet. Ellie, she said, it is a protocol. She opened her laptop and showed me a flowchart she had extracted from the files. It was titled Gullwing, External Validation Strategy. Step 1, normalize data. The script. Step 2, generate impact report. Step 3, recruit third-party amplifier. Jessa pointed to Step 3. It lists potential amplifiers, media outlets, awards committees. I leaned in. The list included industry awards, tech blogs, and Forbes 30 under 40. My blood ran cold. They didn't just target me for the list because of Naomi. I whispered, no, Jessa said. The protocol identifies vulnerable but credible founders to serve as faces for the impact narrative. They wanted you on that list. Ellie, if you won, and if they could link your success back to their mentorship or partnership, you become a shield. You validate them. Naomi's recommendation had accelerated it, but the machinery was already looking for people like me, people hungry for redemption, people who would be so grateful for the award that they wouldn't ask questions about the data behind it. Forbes was supposed to be the amplification channel. It was supposed to be the final layer of the wash. I sat back. They wanted to use me to launder their reputation. I said, again, unless, Jessa said quietly, unless you flip it. I looked at her. Unless the amplifier broadcasts the wrong message. Jessa said, if you go on that list and you use that platform to say, this is a lie, you aren't a shield anymore, you are a spotlight. I spent the rest of the day walking through the city. I walked past the park where Grant and I used to play. I walked past the restaurant where my parents had celebrated their anniversary. I counted the cost. If I did this, if I really did this, I would lose them. My parents would never forgive me for humiliating Grant. Grant would never forgive me for betraying him. I would be an orphan with living parents. I thought about the Christmas dinners I wouldn't be invited to, the phone calls that wouldn't come, the nieces and nephews I might never meet. It was a heavy price. It was a terrifying price. But then I thought about the other price, the price of silence. If I stayed quiet, I would have the money. I would have the family dinners, but I would have to sit at that table and swallow the lie every single time. I would have to watch Grant smirk and know I helped him do it. I would have to look in the mirror and see a coward. I had already lost my self-respect once. I wasn't willing to lose it again. I stopped walking. I was standing in front of the Forbes building. I pulled out my phone and called Naomi. I will do it, I said. Are you sure? Naomi asked. Once we start, we can't stop. I am sure, but I have terms. Tell me. I won't name the innocent beneficiaries. I said, the nonprofits that actually do good work and got caught in this web, we protect them. We stick to verifiable facts, the dashboard, the service account, the risk memo. Agreed, Naomi said. And one more thing. I said, I want Forbes legal involved before we record a single word. I want them to review the structure. I want this story to be bulletproof. I don't want it to be killed by a cease and desist letter on the morning of publication. Naomi paused. That is smart. Marin is already talking to legal. They are nervous, but they are listening. Let them be nervous. I said, I am nervous too. I hung up. I looked up at the glass building reflecting the sky. I felt small, but I felt solid. The interview was set for 2 days from now. I had 48 hours to prepare, 48 hours to say goodbye to the life I was supposed to have, and get ready for the one I was choosing. I turned and walked toward the subway. My step was light. For the first time in years, I wasn't running away. I was walking toward the fight. The conference room at Forbes was glass-walled, suspended 30 stories above the gray pavement of Manhattan. It felt less like a room and more like a high-altitude observation deck, designed to make you feel powerful and insignificant at the same time. Marin Cho sat across from me, a recording device humming silently on the white marble table between us. Naomi sat to my left, ostensibly there as the journalist connecting the dots. But in reality, she was my second. "So, Ellie," Marin said, her pen hovering over a fresh notebook, "the narrative around Verity Flow is compelling. You are using data to police the supply chain. In a world of greenwashing, you are selling truth. Tell me about the innovation behind that." I took a sip of water. My throat felt like it was coated in sandpaper. This was the moment. The script I had rehearsed was safe. It was about proprietary algorithms, machine learning, and scalability. It was the script that got you on the list. I looked at Naomi. She gave me a barely perceptible nod. "Innovation isn't about the code," I said, my voice steadying. "The code is easy. I can hire 10 engineers tomorrow to write a script that validates shipping manifests." Marin raised an eyebrow. "Then what is it?" "Innovation is the willingness to be hated," I said. Marin put her pen down. "Go on. The industry doesn't want truth," I continued. Leaning forward, "The industry wants plausible deniability. My clients don't hire me because they want to find child labor in their factories. They hire me so they can tell their shareholders they looked for it and didn't find it. The innovation of Verity Flow isn't that we find the problems. It is that we refuse to hide them once they are found. We don't have a delete button on our dashboard. That is a feature, not a bug." Marin was watching me closely, her eyes narrowing. "That is a dangerous business model," she said. "You are selling a product that your customers might be afraid to use. It is the only business model that matters," I said. "Anything else is just performance art." I saw a flicker of respect in Marin's eyes. She wasn't looking for a glossy tech founder. She was looking for a fighter. She was testing to see if I would sugarcoat the reality to fit the glossy magazine aesthetic. I hadn't. "But tell me about the cost," Marin said softly. "You have taken hits before." "Brightwell Analytics." I froze. This was the pivot. "I learned at Brightwell that data has no moral compass," I said carefully. "People do. And when the people in charge decide that the graph needs to go up, the truth becomes a casualty. I am building Verity Flow to be immune to that pressure." My phone, which was face up on the table, buzzed, a single, harsh vibration that rattled against the marble. I glanced down, intending to silence it. The notification on the screen stopped my heart. Bank alert. Account ending in 4099. Status frozen. Reason suspicious activity /fraud alert. I felt the blood drain from my face. That was the operating account. That was payroll. That was the rent check I had sent yesterday, Naomi asked, her voice sharp. I picked up the phone. I unlocked it and opened the banking app. A red banner stretched across the top of the screen. Contact compliance immediately. I looked up at Marin. I tried to keep my face neutral, but my hands were shaking. "I am sorry," I said. "I need to take this. It is operations." Marin nodded, but she saw the panic. She turned off the recorder. I walked out of the glass room and into the hallway. I dialed the bank's fraud department. The hold music was a cheerful, synthesized jazz that made me want to scream. "Ms. Reed," a voice finally said, "we have placed a temporary hold on all accounts associated with Verity Flow, Inc., due to a flagged transaction report received this morning." "What report?" I demanded. Pacing the hallway. "What transaction?" "We received an external tip regarding potential money laundering through vendor payments." The agent said calmly, "Standard protocol is to freeze assets pending an investigation. This can take 7 to 10 business days." 7 days. I had payroll in 2 days. If I missed payroll, my engineers would walk. The company would collapse. "Who sent the report?" I asked. "I cannot disclose the source of the inquiry," the agent said. I hung up. I stood by the window. looking out at the city. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a sniper shot. I was sitting in the Forbes office, talking about integrity, and someone had just cut off my air supply. Naomi came out of the conference room. She saw my face. "What is it?" "They froze the accounts," I whispered. "Fraud alert. Money laundering accusations." Naomi's face went hard. "Retaliation. It is survival now." I said, "They aren't just trying to discredit me. They are trying to starve me out." We cut the interview short. Marin was understanding, but I could see the questions forming in her mind. A founder whose bank accounts get frozen mid-interview. That didn't scream 30 under 40. That screamed liability back at my office. The silence was deafening. My 3 employees were working with headphones on, oblivious to the fact that the company was technically insolvent. Naomi sat on the edge of my desk while I frantically typed emails to our investors, trying to get ahead of the rumor mill. "I need one more thing." "Ellie," Naomi said quietly. I looked up at her. "I am fighting for my life here." "Naomi, I know," she said, "but Marin needs it. She needs the nail in the coffin. We have the dashboard screenshot. We have the risk memo, but those are documents. We need confirmation that the executives at Redwood Pike knowingly approved the altered data. We need to prove it wasn't just a rogue algorithm or a mid-level manager. We have the risk memo signed by Grant." I said, "That proves they wanted to silence you." Naomi said, "It doesn't prove they knew the underlying data was fake. They could argue they just thought you were a disgruntled employee spreading lies. We need proof that they knew the metrics were a lie and sold them anyway." I rubbed my temples. "I don't have that. I wasn't in the boardroom." The door to my office slammed open. I jumped. Naomi spun around. Grant was standing in the doorway. He looked like he had been running. His tie was loosened, his hair chaotic. His face was a mask of red, blotchy rage. He didn't look like a partner at a private equity firm. He looked like a man whose house was burning down. "You," he spat, pointing a shaking finger at Naomi. "You are stealing my life, Grant," Naomi said, her voice calm but cold. "You shouldn't be here." "Don't tell me where I should be," Grant shouted. Stepping into the room, he kicked the door shut behind him. The glass rattled. He turned to me. "And you? My own sister. You are jealous. That is what this is, isn't it? You couldn't handle that I was marrying a winner. You couldn't handle that I was finally happy. So you decided to burn it all down." I stood up slowly. The fear I usually felt in Grant's presence was gone, replaced by a cold, clarifying exhaustion. "I am not jealous." "Grant," I said, "I am tired." "You are a child," he yelled. "You are a petulant child throwing a tantrum because you failed and I succeeded. I tried to help you. I offered you a job. I offered you a life, and you spit in my face." He paced the small room, his breathing heavy. "Do you know what you have done?" he hissed. "The partners are asking questions. The merger is on hold. On hold. Because of some rumors about a compliance audit." He looked at Naomi. "You did that. You leaked something." "I didn't leak anything yet." "Grant," Naomi said. "But I am going to—" Grant laughed, a wild, broken sound. "You think you are noble? You are just using me. You are using my family to build your career. You are a parasite." "Naomi, stop it," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room. Grant turned to me. "Stop what?" "Telling the truth. Stop pretending this is about me." I said. I walked around the desk until I was standing 2 feet in front of him. I looked up into his eyes. "You have always needed someone beneath you." "Grant," I said, "even when we were kids, you couldn't just win the game. You had to make me cry when I lost. You need to feel tall, and the only way you know how to do that is to make everyone else small." Grant's mouth opened, but no words came out. "You loved Naomi because she was a trophy." I said, "But then you realized she was taller than you. She was smarter than you, and you couldn't handle it, so you tried to shrink her. You made jokes about her awards. You belittled her work. You tried to turn her into a quiet little wife who would clap for you." I took a breath. "And when she didn't bow, you panicked. Just like you panicked when I refused to sign the fake reports at Brightwell. You don't hate us because we are jealous. Grant, you hate us because we refuse to be your audience. Grant stared at me. The red flushed out of his face, leaving it pale and slack. For a second, I saw the little boy who used to cheat at Monopoly. Then the mask slammed back down. His eyes went cold. You don't know what you are talking about, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You don't understand how the world works. It is business. Ellie, it is just business. Is it? I asked. Was it business when you signed the memo to destroy my reputation? Yes, he shouted. The word hung in the air. Yes, Grant repeated, stepping closer. I signed it. Because I had to. They promised me the partnership track. Ellie, do you know what that means? It means generational wealth. It means power. And they told me there was a loose end. They told me there was a risk that some unstable ex-employee might resurface. He sneered at me. I didn't tell them to kill you. I just told them to neutralize the narrative. It wasn't personal. It was a strategic decision. It wasn't personal. I repeated. No, Grant said. It is the cost of doing business. If you want to sit at the big table, you have to be willing to clear the plates. I did what I had to do to protect my future. And if you weren't so weak, you would understand that. He looked at Naomi, then back at me. I signed it because I'm a winner. And you too? You are just collateral damage. He straightened his jacket, pulling the edges together with a sharp tug. I am done talking to you. If that story runs, Ellie, you are dead to me. Do you hear me? Dead. He turned and walked out. The door clicked shut. I stood there, staring at the wood grain. I felt hollowed out. He had admitted it. It wasn't personal. That was the scariest part. He didn't hate me. He just didn't see me as a person. I was an obstacle. I was a line item in a risk assessment. Naomi moved from the corner. She held up her phone. Did you get that? She asked softly. I looked at the phone in her hand. The recording app was open. The waveform was a jagged red line. I got it, she said. I signed it because I had to. It wasn't personal. She looked at me, her eyes full of sorrow. We have the confirmation. Ellie, we have the proof that he knowingly participated. I looked at the phone. That was my brother's voice. That was the end of our family. Use it, I said. The bank crisis was resolved 6 hours later. But not because of the bank. I called Jessa. I gave her the transaction code the bank agent had slipped up and mentioned during my third call. Jessa called me back in 20 minutes. The report didn't come from a government agency, she said, her voice tinny over the speakerphone. It came from an automated compliance bot. A bot, yeah. It is a system called Sentinel. It flags transactions for potential fraud and automatically reports them to participating financial institutions. Who runs Sentinel, I asked. Jessa paused. The clicking of keys stopped. Sentinel is a proprietary tool developed by a subsidiary of the Armitage Civic Trust. She said, they use it to monitor grantee compliance. I laughed. It was a bitter, jagged sound. So the philanthropy has a weaponized algorithm. I said, exactly. Jessa said, they put a flag on your company ID. The bot crawled the banking network, found your account, and triggered the freeze. It is automated warfare. Ellie, they didn't even have to make a phone call. They just typed your name into a database and let the code do the strangling. I thanked Jessa and hung up. I called the bank back. I told them I had evidence that the report was generated by a competitor's subsidiary. I threatened to call the state attorney general. I used David Cohen's name. The account was unfrozen by 5:00 p.m., but I knew it was temporary. They had shown me their reach. They could turn off my lights whenever they wanted. I went to Naomi's apartment that evening. I needed to not be alone. When I arrived, the door was unlocked. The apartment was quiet. There were boxes in the hallway. Naomi was sitting on the floor in the living room, staring at a small velvet box on the coffee table. The engagement ring. He came back, I asked, sitting down beside her. He came here after he left your office, she said. He tried to apologize. He brought flowers. She gestured to a bouquet of white roses that had been thrown into the trash can in the kitchen. He told me he was just stressed. Naomi said, he told me he didn't mean what he said to you. He said we could still fix this. He said we were a power couple. She picked up the velvet box. I asked him a question. She said, I asked him, Grant, did you ever love me as a person? Or did you just love that I was a trophy you could put on your shelf? She opened the box. The diamond glittered in the dim light. It looked cold and hard. What did he say? I whispered. He said, Don't be dramatic, Naomi. Of course I love you. You are the perfect woman for me. You fit the profile exactly. Naomi snapped the box shut. You fit the profile. She looked at me. He couldn't answer the question without referencing himself. Ellie, he couldn't say, I love your laugh, or I love how you drink coffee. He loves me because I fit. She stood up and walked to the window. I gave him the ring back. I told him to leave. Did he argue? No, she said. He just looked annoyed, like I was a vending machine that had eaten his dollar. He called me ungrateful. Then he left. She turned to me. She wasn't crying. She looked lighter. I am free, Ellie. I looked at the boxes in the hall. You are moving. I can't stay here, she said. This place has his ghost in it. And once the story breaks, it isn't going to be safe. She was right. The story? It was coming. The next morning, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Reed, a smooth male voice said, speaking. My name is Marcus Thorne. I represent the executive committee of Redwood Pike. I sat up straighter. The big guns. I am listening. We are aware of the difficulties you have been experiencing, Thorne said. The banking issues. The contract termination with Greenthread. It is a series of unfortunate misunderstandings. Misunderstandings, I repeated. We would like to correct them. Thorne said, We have spoken to Greenthread. They are willing to reinstate your contract immediately. In fact, they are willing to double the volume. And regarding the bank, we can ensure that your company is whitelisted across all major financial institutions. No more flags, ever. I waited. And, Thorne continued, we are prepared to offer a grant from the Armitage Trust, $500,000, no strings attached, just a gesture of goodwill to a promising female founder, $500,000, plus the contract, plus peace. And what do I have to do? I asked. Nothing, Thorne said. Absolutely nothing. You just sign a mutual non-disparagement agreement. It simply states that neither party will speak negatively about the other in the press or public forums. We restore your reputation. You restore our peace of mind. It was the golden ticket. I could have my life back. I could have my brother back, or at least a truce. My parents would be happy. I could sleep at night. I closed my eyes. I imagined it. The relief washed over me like warm water. I could just stop fighting. I could just be Ellie Reed, the successful CEO. But then I heard Grant's voice in my head. It wasn't personal. We neutralized the narrative. If I signed, I wasn't neutralizing the narrative. I was becoming part of it. I would be another person they bought. Another person who knew the truth and swallowed it for a check. I opened my eyes. Mr. Thorne, I said, yes, tell Grant that he can't buy me, and tell him that the price of my silence is higher than he can afford. There was a pause. The temperature on the line dropped 10 degrees. Ms. Reed, Thorne said, his voice stripping away the politeness. If you decline this offer, there will be no safety net. We will litigate you into the ground. We will make you toxic. You already tried that. I said, and I am still here. I hung up. I sat in my chair for a long time. My heart was pounding. I had just turned down safety. I had just chosen war. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the email to Marin Cho and Naomi. I attached the timeline I had built. I attached the screenshot of the dashboard with the vector service account. I attached the PDF of the risk memo with Grant's signature. I attached the audio file Naomi had sent me. And finally, I attached a document I had spent the morning writing. A sworn affidavit. I, Eleanor Reed, hereby attest that during my employment at Brightwell Analytics, I witnessed the systematic alteration of performance data. I read it one last time. It was the truth. It was the whole truth. I moved the cursor to the send button. I thought about my parents. They would be devastated. They would say I destroyed the family. I thought about Grant. He would hate me forever. But then I thought about the girl I used to be. The girl who cried in her car after getting fired, thinking she was crazy. The girl who let them define her failure. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing this for her. I clicked send. The email whooshed away. I sat back. The room was quiet. The sun was streaming through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was done. The story was out of my hands. It was about to be in the world. And once it was out, nothing would ever be the same again. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 3 years, the air tasted clean. The week the story broke, it didn't start with the truth. It started with the noise. Maren Cho and Naomi had scheduled the publication for Thursday morning. On Tuesday, Redwood Pike launched their offensive. It was a masterclass in preemptive destruction. A strategy designed to poison the water so thoroughly that by the time the actual reporting landed, no one would want to drink it. It began with a blind item in a popular tech newsletter, the kind that industry insiders read with their morning coffee. It described a failed female founder who was weaponizing her personal grievances to target a prominent financial firm. By noon, the blind item had names. I sat in my office, watching the notifications roll in like a tide of sewage. Is Ellie Reed the new face of founder burnout? Sources say, Verity Flow. CEO has history of instability and data mismanagement. The vengeful ex-sister-in-law. How family drama is rocking the Redwood merger. They didn't just attack my competence. They attacked my sanity. They leaked the screenshots from the Green Thread dossier, the out-of-context jokes, the late-night frustrations. They painted a portrait of a woman who was hysterical, bitter, and fundamentally unreliable. I felt the old panic rising in my chest. A cold, suffocating weight that I remembered from the days after Brightwell. My hands started to shake. I wanted to close my laptop, crawl under my desk, and disappear. I wanted to call Grant and beg him to make it stop, but I wasn't that girl anymore. I forced myself to breathe. In for 4 counts. Out for 4 counts. I picked up a pen and a pad of paper. I started writing down the facts. Fact. The Gullwing script exists. Fact. The service account SVC_V ECT_07 was active on October 12th. Fact. Grant signed the risk memo. I wrote them over and over again, anchoring myself to the reality of the paper. The internet was a storm of noise, but the facts were rocks. They couldn't be shouted down. They just were. Naomi called me at 2 o'clock. Don't look at Twitter, she said. Her voice was tight but steady. Too late, I said. They are saying I am doing this because I am in love with Grant and jealous of you. It is almost creative. It is the standard playbook. Naomi said, isolate the whistleblower. Pathologize her dissent. Make her look crazy so you don't have to look at her evidence. But Ellie. Yes, it means they are terrified. They wouldn't be burning this much capital on a smear campaign if they thought the story was weak. They are trying to kill it in the crib. Let them try. I said, I was surprised to find that I meant it. The fear was there, but the shame was gone. My parents called at 6 o'clock. They didn't call the office line. They called my cell. I let it ring twice before answering, bracing myself for the tone I knew would be waiting on the other end. Ellie, my mother said. She sounded small, fragile. Grant is here. I closed my eyes. I could picture them in the living room in Connecticut. The fire would be lit. Grant would be pacing, a glass of scotch in his hand, spinning the narrative until he was the victim and I was the monster. He says you are going to ruin him, Mom said. He says you and Naomi are planning to publish lies. He says he will lose his partnership. Ellie, please, you can't do this to your brother. I am not doing it to him. Mom, I said tiredly. He did it to himself. We are a family, my father shouted from the background. His voice was raw, cracking with a helpless anger I had never heard before. You don't destroy family. I took a deep breath. I am coming over. I said, "No, Ellie. Grant is, I am coming over." I repeated, "I will be there in an hour." I hung up. I grabbed the folder, the physical folder containing the timeline, the affidavits, and the risk memo. I got in my car and drove north, the city lights fading into the dark sprawl of the suburbs. When I pulled into the driveway, Grant's Porsche was parked in its usual spot, gleaming under the floodlights like a sleek, predatory animal. I parked my dented sedan next to it. I walked into the house. The air was thick with tension, smelling of wood smoke and anxiety. My parents were sitting on the cream sofa, looking 10 years older than they had last week. Grant was standing by the fireplace, his back to the room. He turned when I entered. His face was a mask of cold fury. "You have some nerve," he said. I didn't look at him. I walked straight to the coffee table and dropped the folder onto the glass surface. It landed with a heavy slap. "Read it," I said to my parents. "Ellie, we don't want to see," my mother started, tears streaming down her face. "Read it," I said, my voice rising. "You want to know why I am doing this? You want to know why I am ruining the family? Read the documents." Grant stepped forward. "Don't touch that," he commanded. "It is just more of her delusions. She is sick. Mom, I told you, she is obsessed with the past." My father looked at Grant, then at the folder. He reached out a trembling hand and opened it. He began to read. The room was silent. Save for the crackling of the fire and the rustle of paper, Grant stood still, his jaw working, but he didn't move to stop them. He knew, deep down, that physical force would only confirm the guilt. My father read the timeline. He read the affidavit about the altered metrics, and then he turned to the last page, the risk memo. He stared at it for a long time. Strategy preemptive neutralization of credibility. He looked at the signature at the bottom. Grant, my father whispered. Grant crossed his arms. "It is a standard legal document. Dad, you protect the firm from liabilities. Ellie was a liability." My father looked up. His eyes were wide, bewildered. "She is your sister," he said. "You signed a paper to neutralize your sister. She was threatening the merger," Grant snapped, his composure cracking. "She wouldn't let it go. I did what I had to do to protect us, to protect this house, to protect your retirement." My mother took the paper from my father's hands. She read it. She went very still. The color drained from her face, leaving her gray and ashen. She looked at Grant, not with anger, but with a terrible, dawning recognition. "You knew," she whispered, "when she was fired from Brightwell, when she was crying in her room for months, when she couldn't get a job. You knew they had set her up. I didn't know the details," Grant started. "You knew she screamed, a sound that tore through the polite silence of the house. You knew she was innocent, and you let her think she was crazy. You let us tell her to move on." Grant recoiled as if she had slapped him. "Mom, be realistic. It was business. It was cruelty." My father said. His voice was shaking. I stood there, watching them. I thought I would feel triumphant, vindicated, but I didn't. I just felt sad. I was watching the breaking of a spell. They were finally seeing the son they had worshipped, and the sight was breaking their hearts. My father closed the folder. He placed his hand on top of it, heavy and final. "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" he asked me, his voice soft, filled with regret. "Why did you carry this alone for 3 years?" I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to value stability above all else, because you wouldn't have believed me then. I said, the truth hung in the air, undeniable. If I had come to them 3 years ago, without the memo, without the signature, they would have told me I was being dramatic. They would have told me to support Grant. They needed the proof to break the loyalty. Grant looked at the three of us. He saw the shift. He saw the line being drawn, and for the first time in his life, he was on the other side of it. "Fine," he spat. "You want to side with her, fine. But know this." He pointed a finger at me. "If that story runs on Thursday, I will sue Naomi for defamation. I will sue you for breach of contract. I will spend every dollar I have to bury you in litigation until you are begging for bankruptcy. And you," he looked at me with cold, dead eyes. You are dead to me. Do not call me. Do not come to my wedding if there even is one. You are not my sister. You are a rat. I looked at him. I felt a strange lightness. The threat didn't land. He had already done his worst. He had already sold me out. I won't sue you, Grant, I said quietly, and I won't lie for you anymore. I am done performing loyalty that requires me to hate myself. Grant sneered. He grabbed his keys from the table. Enjoy the rubble, he said. He stormed out of the house. The front door slammed, shaking the frame. We heard the Porsche roar to life and tear down the driveway. My mother put her face in her hands and wept. My father stood up and walked over to me. He hesitated, then pulled me into a hug. It was stiff, awkward, but he held on. I am sorry, he whispered into my hair. I closed my eyes. It wasn't a fix. It didn't undo the years of silence, but it was a start. Naomi didn't wait for the article to drop to make her move. On Wednesday morning, she took the train to Connecticut. She didn't go to see Grant. She went to see Grant's mother. She told me about it later. She walked up to the door, declined the offer of tea, and handed my mother the velvet box. There was a note inside. Naomi showed me the draft. Dear Catherine, I cannot marry a man who treats people like collateral damage. I hope, for your sake, he learns the difference between love and possession. I am sorry it had to end this way. Naomi, she didn't scream. She didn't throw the ring. She just returned the asset. That afternoon, she posted a short statement on her social media channels. Regarding the speculation about my engagement, I will not be discussing my personal life. My reporting on Redwood Pike stands on its own. I write about systems, not individuals. Read the story tomorrow. It was a masterstroke of restraint. Grant was out there leaking stories about her being a jilted bride. She responded by acting like a professional who had simply discarded a distraction. It made his tantrums look small. It made the story hit harder because it wasn't gossip. It was journalism. Thursday arrived. The Forbes website refreshed at 8 a.m. The package was titled, The Cost of Good Intentions. On the left was Naomi's investigative deep dive, The Impact Illusion, How Redwood Pike Manufactured a Philanthropic Empire. It was devastating. It laid out the Gullwing Protocol step by step. It showed the flow of money from the Armitage Trust to the shell vendors. It showed the time-stamped dashboard. It showed the risk memo. It didn't paint Grant as a cartoon villain. It painted him as a cog in a machine that turned lies into profit. It showed the system, and on the right was my profile, the whistleblower, CEO Eleanor Reed, on why transparency is the only metric that matters. I read it with my heart in my throat. Marin hadn't written a puff piece. She hadn't glossed over the unstable narrative. She had leaned into it. For 3 years, Ellie Reed was told she was the problem. She was fired, discredited, and silenced. But in an industry obsessed with the appearance of doing good, Reed suggests that the most disruptive act is simply telling the truth about what is bad. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was a war story. By 10 o'clock a.m., the internet was burning. But this time, the smoke wasn't coming from my house. Hashtag Redwood Pike was trending. Hashtag Gullwing Protocol was trending. At noon, the New York Attorney General announced a formal inquiry into the charitable activities of the Armitage Civic Trust. At 2 o'clock p.m., a press release was issued by Redwood Pike. In light of recent allegations, the Board of Directors has voted to pause the proposed merger pending an internal review. We take these claims seriously and are committed to full transparency. Paused. The billion-dollar deal was dead in the water. My phone rang. It was David Cohen, the lawyer. You should check the stock price, he said, sounding like he was smiling around a cigar. I checked. Redwood Pike was down 12%. And Ellie Cohen said, I just got a call from their general counsel. They want to know if we are open to a settlement regarding your termination from Brightwell. I laughed. It was a surprised, bubbling sound. Tell them I am busy, I said. The aftermath wasn't a parade. It was a mess. Grant didn't sue. He went dark. He took a leave of absence from the firm. My mother told me he had gone to a house in the Hamptons and wasn't answering calls. The partnership track was gone. The golden boy had lost his shine. I received hate mail. People called me a traitor. People called me a difficult woman who couldn't handle authority. But I also received other emails. Dear Ms. Reed, I read the article. I was an analyst at a firm in Chicago, and I saw the same thing. Dear Ellie, thank you for saying it. I thought I was crazy. And then came the offers. A venture capital firm in San Francisco wanted to lead a Series B round for Verity Flow. We want to be on the right side of history, the partner wrote. Greenthread sent a new contract. They didn't apologize, but they increased their rates by 20%. I signed it. Business is business. I wasn't a pariah anymore. I was a symbol. To some, I was a snitch. To others, I was a signal that the game was changing. I walked through the streets of New York, and the buildings didn't look so tall anymore. The glass towers where men like Grant made their deals didn't look like fortresses. They looked like greenhouses, fragile, transparent, and capable of being shattered by a single stone. 3 weeks later, I stood backstage at the Ethical Innovation Summit. The air conditioning was freezing. My hands were sweating. I adjusted the microphone pack clipped to my belt. I was wearing the blue dress again. The armor. I peeked through the curtain. The auditorium was packed. 1,000 faces. In the front row, there was an empty seat next to Naomi. It was the seat where a brother should have been. I felt a pang of grief, sharp and familiar. I missed him. I missed the brother who used to buy me ice cream and tell me I was smart, but I knew that brother had been gone a long time. He had been traded away, piece by piece, for a corner office. Ellie, a stagehand, whispered, "You are up." I took a deep breath. I thought about the silence I had lived in. I thought about the fear. I thought about the thousands of people who were still sitting in offices right now, staring at altered spreadsheets, wondering if they dared to speak. I walked out onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The applause was polite, curious. I walked to the podium. I gripped the sides of it, feeling the solid wood under my fingers. I waited for the room to go quiet. I looked out at the sea of investors, founders, and journalists, the people who built the lists, the people who decided who mattered. I didn't start with a thank you. I didn't start with a joke. I leaned into the microphone. "Success isn't the list," I said. My voice rang out clear and steady through the hall. "Success isn't the valuation. It isn't the headline. It isn't the merger." I paused. I looked directly into the camera at the back of the room, knowing that somewhere, in a dark room in the Hamptons, Grant might be watching. Success is what you refuse to fake to get there. I smiled, and then I began to tell the truth. Thank you for listening to this story. It has been a journey through the dark corridors of ambition and the blinding light of truth. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below sharing your city or country. If you enjoyed Ellie's fight for integrity, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. And I want to ask you, have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between loyalty and the truth? Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one.